You're listening to the Real Estate Runway podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we are all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, the recovering engineer turned multifamily investor, Chad Sutton.
All right, Real Estate Runway family, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. I'm your host, Chad Sutton with Quattro Capital, and I'm here today with a very special guest, Mr. Logan Freeman. I think Logan and I have rescheduled this podcast like 7 times, and we're finally getting to meet each other and do this. So thanks, Logan, for being here. And guys, I can't say enough about Logan. This guy, he is an ex-NFL athlete turned real estate investor and broker. So there's a lot to talk about there. He's the key principal and co-founder, as well as the chief development officer for FTW Investments, a firm which has acquired 1,500 units in the multifamily space in just under 2 years across 4 states. We would consider him an expert in the Midwest region of the U.S. in real estate. And he's also, if that's not enough, the owner of Exchange CRE, which is a specialized niche investment brokerage firm for 1031 exchanges. Logan, welcome to the show. How are you doing, brother?
Chad, thanks for having me. Like you mentioned, rescheduling is hard to do, but we had to get this on the calendar, and I am just energized, thriving, and focused and ready to bring some value today, brother.
Absolutely. Well, usually I start this off with like a who the hell is Logan Freeman conversation. I think a lot of us know you from your background, but I'd love to hear, kind of through your background coming from professional level of sports and coming into real estate, you had to reinvent yourself a couple of times. Yeah. I'd love to hear about that journey a little bit, and then we'll get into maybe some meat about what it is you're doing today and kind of your thoughts on the investment market. What do you think?
Absolutely, man. I think that sounds great. So it all started back when I was a 14-year-old boy in Jefferson City, Missouri, and was watching my mom work 2 jobs, man. I mean, she would work night shift, Monday through Friday. And then also on the weekends, she'd go work at a nursing home just to kind of keep us in a steady place, and the reason for that was my father, battled drugs and alcohol his whole life. And so I watched my mom work her tail off, and it did 2 things for me. One, it created the blue collar work ethic that I think is important, but 2, the value of money. And it really helped me understand and try to want to understand what investing really meant. As a young man, I said, look, well, I got to go work for my dollars, right? But then as I progressed through that, right, going to college, meeting other people, seeing, what their parents do and all these different things, I started to be around folks that were thinking differently. And college is really where my mindset changed. After being cut from the NFL, I went back to school and finished my master's degree. And I got a job making 265 cold calls a day. And I would drive an hour to that job, drive an hour back. Well, what did I do on those 2 hours per day? Well, I made my car the classroom on wheels. I think that's Zig Ziglar, right? And I just started digesting as much as I can. John Lee Dumas, Lewis Howes, Brian Tracy, Zig, Jim Rohn, all these guys, Darren Hardy. And I was like, all right, there is a different world out there that I have to first shift my mental perspective to start understanding. And I kind of came up against this rub because I was taking all of these high level classes that weren't talking about anything practical in the real world. I mean, this was a master's program. The one class that really opened my eyes was a marketing class where we read Seth Godin's Purple Cow. We read, a couple books by Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit. These types of books. And I was like, oh man, I got to start diving into this stuff. And I really did. And that helped me shift kind of my perspective throughout that. I picked up the Little Purple Book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I had the pleasure of, finally meeting Kenny McElroy and those guys a couple of weeks ago, which was pretty cool. But really that helped me shift kind of my perspective and said, okay, I got to work for my dollars right now, but I can't be thinking like that at all times. And so big mental shift happened on that front, but also in my life personally. So, not an athlete anymore, cut from the NFL, lost 100 pounds in 6 months, started making cold calls, started this mental shift. But then after I graduated, man, I mean, my dad really went down a bad path, and I lost him 2 weeks after I graduated. 8 years ago today, not today, but this last month, 8 years ago. And man, that really said, okay, I got this mental shift happening, with the way I think about life, but also I just saw what happens, firsthand when you make certain decisions. And thankfully, I do thank God every day that he pulled me up out of that. I had some mentors that said, hey, I got to stick my prongs in this guy. And he's willing to do the work. He just doesn't know what work to do. And I followed them. I stuck with them. And I just spent a lot of time with them and helped me kind of make some better decisions. So that led me to Kansas City, where I now live. And I worked a few jobs in Kansas City, quickly realized I was unemployable, man. I could not have a cap on my production, and so, I was fired after about 4 years of working, and that was about 5 years ago. And I said, okay, what the heck am I going to do? I'm newly married, just bought a house, just got fired, and I said, it's time to put these 600 books to work that I've read. And it's great to read books, but it's better to apply those books. And
right.
One of them was obviously heavily focused in real estate. So I jumped in the real estate space as the head of acquisitions for a $50 million fund, just learning the business, hustling, knocking on doors, making cold calls, negotiating deals. Was able to get 150 transactions under my belt pretty quickly. These are single family homes and small multifamily deals. I sat down with these sponsors after doing a huge refinance to those investors and still cash flowing. But mind you, this was back in 17, 18, and 19, before all of the craze, where you could still find a little equity in some of those projects. These are all single family homes and small multis, which, hard to do now. But I said, guys, where did the money come from? And they said, this was a syndication. I'm like, a syndo what? What is that? And so I had to go read the books.
Cinda what?
Yeah, Cinda what? I was like, what? I don't even know how to spell that word. What are you talking about? And so I dove in, found the real estate guys, found Michael Blanc, Joe Fairless, Hunter Thompson, started just putting all this stuff into my brain. And I went over to the commercial multifamily world. So I said, okay, I still need to get some more reps. And so I started representing buyers that did not live in Kansas City, but needed my network and needed deal flow. And they had 1031 exchanges and they were on a deadline. So I started repping these buyers, something that hasn't really been done a whole lot in the brokerage space, because if you don't have a process, you can find a lot of tire kickers. Well, took my sales background, vetted people very quickly, and was able to be a top producer for about 3 years here in Kansas City, repping buyers. And that got me a little bit of money in my pocket. And I said, I think it's time for me to do this on my own. And so I've been building a network, bought a couple deals, man. And Chad, I have to tell you, first couple deals I bought, I thought that I could just do everything, and learned very quickly that 1, you run out of cash, and 2, you run out of time.
Yes.
And
time probably being the bigger problem.
100%, because you can leverage other people's money, right? But, so I went back and I said, I got to build a team. So I did 2 things. I did a real big stock of strength finders, Colby assessment. What am I good at? Where's my sweet spot? The intersection of my greatest strength and my greatest passion. Okay, I took that mental model, I put it over into what I'll call, not what I call, but the Japanese call ikigai, which is just another Venn diagram that helps you kind of think about all of these different things and kind of find that sweet spot. I overlaid that to the commercial multifamily ownership route and said, okay, where do I need to fill the gaps in? And so I just went out there in the marketplace and networked for another 15 months to find my 2 partners now, who have operational and finance background in scaling companies, those types of situations. I said, okay, let's do a couple deals together, see how it goes. And then this was, back in 19. And then obviously everybody knows what happened in 2020 with COVID-19. And, that presented a big opportunity, Chad. It said, all right, well, there's a lot of people on the sidelines right now. I've studied the fundamentals. I've been in the business for 4 years. Let's go hard and let's try to do as much as we can and build a portfolio and a team. And so we started doing that. And that really kind of leads us to where we're at today with about 14 or 15 folks here at FTW Investments. The brokerage that you mentioned is now launched, which we're helping out-of-state buyers, creating an online marketplace for sellers and buyers to transact. At some point, there will be some blockchain integrated into that. I mean, obviously, tech is revolutionizing the commercial real estate space. And if you're not on the trends, then you're going to be washed away with the tide. And so making sure we're staying on the front end of all of those different things, which gives me a good pulse of what's going on in the marketplace. But really the big focus for us now, like we were talking about earlier, is just getting better at our standard operating procedures. I think a lot of people get into this business and they're like, we're going to do a, 300 unit multifamily deal. And I'm like, okay, great. What's it look like when this happens? Well, I'll spend 8 hours on that. I'm like, no, can't do that. You need a system, you need a process, you need a team, you need people, you need resources and to use leverage, because when you have 8 of those 300 unit deals going on, you can't do all of that. And so a big push for us the last 15 months has been really to build that out so we can continue to be great operators in the space from the ground up. And so that's what we're focused on now, highly focused here in the Midwest, but starting to get my eyes opened up to, other markets when great people bring us opportunities and evaluating those as well. So that's kind of a little bit of the background.
Wow. So we went through a lot just then. I mean, the first thing that kind of comes to mind there is you kind of glossed over this a little bit as if it was no big deal, but I mean, you got cut from the NFL, know, so first of all, like, wow, you're in the NFL, for most people, that's a lifetime accomplishment, right?
Right.
And that many will never have the opportunity to do. So you've known you had to have some sort of mental toughness to play at that level in the first place.
That's right.
And the mental toughness you had to have to leave that and basically switch your entire life plan. Probably. You probably didn't plan on getting cut. You planned on playing for a long time, right?
Yeah, this was against my agent's guidance. I will tell you that. And a week after I made the decision, the 49ers called and said, hey, our center just went down. We want to fly you out. Where are you at? And I said, you know what, guys, I appreciate that, but my calling is somewhere else. And so, I mean, when I put my feet in the mud and kind of, that was the moment that the identity changed. You have the opportunity to go out and try to make another team, or you got an opportunity to go do something else. And, from my body standpoint, I'm pretty proud of making that decision, just because I have a head on me, and I got hip and back problems, but nothing to the tune of playing, 5, 6, 10 seasons in the NFL as an offensive lineman. So, that was just a big turning point in my life. And I think that when you can get your head wrapped around an alternative, or, hey, I'm no longer identifying as this type of person. That takes a lot of inner work. I did a lot of prayer, a lot of inner work, a lot of talking to people. But what you do is not who you are, and I think that was the quote.
Say that again. Say that louder.
What you do is not who you are.
Boom.
How
that is
you
a quotable
do it,
moment right there.
How you do it and how you show up every single day is who you are. And when I could make that delineation between the two is when my whole life started to really blossom out, because, you have a lot of stock in one thing and, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. When that's taken away from you, obviously we've all seen the headlines of, you got somebody who has $100 million contract, 3 years later, they lost all their money. It's because they don't have an identity. And so I had to reinvent that identity. And thankfully, I had great mentors physically, but also in books that really helped me kind of pull up and create that new identity, which was so important.
And what was the next thing you said? That there was another quotable moment I wanted to go back to. It was something about the intersection of X and Y being your passion.
Yeah.
Say that again.
So this is Ken Coleman, who was with the Dave Ramsey show. He's got the Ken Coleman show, but he said the intersection between your greatest passion and your greatest strength lies your sweet spot. And if you can find that and operate in that, that's where you start to create what I call brilliance. And brilliance is what you're paid for. You're not paid for all the little things that you're doing all the time. It's operating in that sweet spot. And that's how we start to compress time and create leverage, utilizing people, capital, and technology to actually elevate from what you can actually get done. And so that's the most important thing. Every team member we've got, I'm trying to understand what is their sweet spot. And if I can see that they're, not in that sweet spot, say, hey, I'm recognizing out there that this is not something that you're either understanding or there's something that we need to address. And so taking a little bit of Ray Dalio's radical transparency and saying, let's talk about this, let's address this fear, false emotions appearing real, and let's step back into that and embrace that and change that. Then you just see the people's weight just go, and now they're standing up a little stronger. They're talking a little more confident. They got a little more swagger behind them. And that's what we want. We want people operating in those sweet spots.
Logan, there are just quotable moments just emanating from your essence right now. I'm loving it. So my podcast editors are going to have a lot of fun with this.
Awesome. Awesome.
So, you said something there at the end that I think is a great transition into our next topic.
Yeah.
So I think we take this into maybe the discussion of building a team and building a business briefly. And then I'd love to have a conversation on kind of where we are in the market today, what your strategy is, what you're seeing, and how it's affecting your decisions, right?
Absolutely.
But first of all, you mentioned, wow, I just, you get 8 of these deals going at one time, and you got to be wary of trying to do everything yourself, right? Yes, you might do everything better than the people that you employ, but if you have 14 people, even if they're doing 80% of what you could do, that's 14 times 80. That's a lot more than 100% of what you can do, right?
That's
so
exactly right.
Let's talk about building a team. What have you found is the most important aspect of A, why you're building a team, and B, how to do it?
Yeah. Most important aspect is for whoever's running the business to understand what their sweet spots are and get out of the things that are not creating that energy.
Out of your own way.
And then the second part is, clear expectations, right? Like I've been on, both sides of this where I've set really great, clear expectations and just matched the wrong person to the role and said, oh my gosh, this isn't working out, and had to exit that relationship. And that hurts, because as a business owner, you want people to be successful. It's hard to train people up. It's hard to find great talent. So you want to make sure that is created up front. And so, I've had to get really comfortable being uncomfortable. And my wife always looks at me and she's like, how many crucial conversations do you have to have every single day? And I'm like, every single one of them. I'm not glossing over anything. If I notice somebody say something, we stop and we say, hey, that came out of, left field here. We're not sure what that meant. Let's dive into that and address that. Not, hey, let's just brush that under the rug and talk about that later. Let's bring that to the table right now. And this is from Principles, Ray Dalio's book. And he came out with Principles U, which is a personality assessment which creates kind of your personality type that's on different archipelagos. Just think about them as islands, right? Well, my island is all 3 of my top ones are on the same island. It's campaigner, advocate, and coach. So I know where my sweet spot is. Not a strategist necessarily, not a visionary necessarily. I love to get things done and help people do that, right? I'm an achiever. I'm competitive. I was an achievement-based love guy my whole life. That's, you get good grades, you get love. Not necessarily like that's the best parenting style now that I've got 2 young ones myself, but that's what I grew up with. And so that's ingrained in me from day one. And so when I'm looking at building a team, right, everybody says you got to have the right people in the right seats on the right vehicle headed in the right direction. Okay, sure. That's complete at the theoretical level, a little more hard to apply at the effective level, right? And so then it's like, well, let's actually break down who you are as a person, what you value, where your strengths are. Let's understand your weaknesses. So if you think about strength finders, you got balconies and basements. Just because something is your strength, it's a talent really, if cultivated into a strength. But those strengths also have what we call basements as well. And so you got to realize that your greatest strength can also be your greatest basement if you're not careful. And so you have to realize that. And that's where I'm trying to say, okay, overlay those values, those strengths, those talents with a role that will allow you to grow in that. And so then what's the responsibilities and how are we staying accountable? For us, I love to utilize what's called the power list. I'm a big Andy Frisella listener. I don't necessarily agree with everything that Andy's done, but he's a St. Louis guy here, right by Kansas City. Started everything from scratch, brute forced his way into where he was until he had to start building a team. And I would say that he's very good at cultivating leaders. And there's 3 levels of delegation. You have directive, objective, and leadership. Directive is, hey, I need a steak for lunch. Go to this restaurant, pick it up at this time. Second, objective. Hey, I'm hungry. I need a steak. Go find it. Third, leadership. I need some lunch, right? I'm trying to get to leadership with every single person. What I found when building a team was I tried to start on level 3 without going through levels 1 and 2. That's where the disconnect happens, and that's where you start to see people kind of trail off. And so every team member that you have to be working through those 3 levels of delegation to help them and get to a point where they can become a leader of their own selves. And that's the greatest, what I'll say, secret of trying to build a team. You know what that takes? It takes a lot of time as a business owners, but that creates leverage to be able to go do what your sweet spot is actually telling you to do. So that's kind of the way that we think about building a team, man.
Yeah, and those are all hugely important points here. I mean, we kind of follow the Dan Sullivan method of who, not how, right?
That's right.
A lot of commonalities in what you just said there. And I think that the premise of it is you can, once the first step beyond the I'm a mentality of doing it yourself is, okay, I've hired a few people, or I've put some people in those seats, and then I'm going to hold their head facing in the right direction, right? I'm not going to let them deviate. I'm going to make sure they do it my way, and they look right out the front window of the bus that's driving in the same direction. Well, they're going to get tired of that eventually, right?
Yep.
And so what you're saying, and this is actually where the art of leadership comes in, and it does take time, because think about training your kids, right,
Mm-hmm.
to tie their shoes, and you're trying to get out the door in 15 minutes before the traffic hits, right? It's going to take longer every single time, and probably for a couple of weeks until they figure out how to tie their damn shoe.
That's right.
But, eventually they will become self-sufficient, and you don't have to tie the shoes anymore. But if you take the quick way in the moment and tie it for them, they don't learn a thing, right? They just expect you to do it for them. And then what are you paying them for? Right.
Yep,
So
exactly.
It doesn't work with children, but you get the point, so very, very good stuff, man. Okay. So, and you've mentioned Ray Dalio a couple of times. That's another guy I think we both have commonality in following. Yeah. Folks who have not watched this, go look for Ray Dalio's market cycle video on YouTube. If you don't understand market cycles, that will absolutely be something that really helps you see that everything is cyclical, and here's why,
Mm-hmm.
And so leading that into our next conversation here, and probably our final topic for this episode, where are we today?
Yeah.
Because we're in an environment where we're coming out of COVID. Some argue we're still in it, right? But from the economic impact, we're kind of coming out of it to a degree. Mm-hmm. Policies are changing, as with every semi downturn, more regulation shows up, and to try to, we're not going to say why that is. And, real estate is, in a lot of people's eyes, going crazy in terms of the prices that these assets are commanding, and that's a supply and demand problem. So I'd love to just turn it over to you and see what Logan Freeman and FTW Investments are seeing in the market today and how it's affecting your decisions.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for that. And I will start the conversation with the changing world order that may or may not be happening right now. But if you follow Ray Dalio, you know that this is his new book, where he took a study of the last 500 years of the rises and falls of all the dynasties. Okay. And there's 3 main factors that kind of come together to create what he calls the big cycle. Then these 3 are this, right? There's, there's where you have the Federal Reserve, or the central bank, has interest rates that are very low and has been printing a lot of money. And so the levers that they can pull are limited. You have a rising superpower. In this instance, it's China. And then the third one, you have internal and external disorder. So think about the United States. We have never been this divided ever. Maybe not ever, but Vietnam was a pretty divided time as well. But we're kind of back in that space where, there is no moderates, right? I mean, you're on this side or this side, and people are not really talking together well. And then you have external disorder. Think about, Russia and China and different things right there. So all 3 of those are kind of in flux, right? And so you think about that. Back in 1945 was when the gold standard was kind of taken off, right? We were all taking off the gold standard. So Bretton Woods was kind of this scenario where, dollars were not tied to gold anymore. And so now we have fiat currencies. And so when you think about from the standpoint of all of these things happening, there's a long-term debt cycle. And he explains this in how the economy, the economic machine works video, which I highly, you mentioned that. I highly recommend people watching that, but much more in detail in the Changing World Order and in the Big Debt Crisis that he wrote, those 2 books. But the long-term debt cycle, typically 55 to 75 years. We're on year 77. And so when you think about that, you think about China on the upswing, you think about United States on the downswing from the standpoint of productivity. This is how you cure all of this. You have to be more productive, meaning you have to create more than you're spending, right? And we are not doing that currently. And so there's a lot of things that are kind of leading us to this kind of big changing world order. So when all 3 of those kind of factors come together, there could be a changing world order, meaning somebody else might take over the world currency. That might take some time. The dollar is tied to a lot of things. That I've talked to some really high level economic people about this, Richard Duncan being one of them, who's one of my go-to resources on macroeconomics. But not to say that this is the other piece that he mentions. Just because something has not happened in our lifetime doesn't mean it can't and it won't. And if you look back the past 500 years, history might not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And that is Mark Twain. And Howard Marks talks a lot about that. And so you come to the conclusion that we may have some sort of scenario happen that the United States is no longer kind of the superpower that we are. How does that affect our investments? How do we think about that going forward is the next kind of question to ask, right? And so obviously people talk a lot about inflation, interest rates. Those are all components of this. But if the world currency really does change, all of our investments are going to be up in the air a little bit. There's going to be a lot of craziness that happens. And Ray Dalio talks about this when Bretton Woods, was taken off of the gold standard, or when Bretton Woods happened. This is this whole situation. He showed up on the stock trading floor and he thought that the stocks were going to tank. And actually stocks went through the roof. And he said, man, I had to find out why. And so he went back and studied and found that it happened with FDR as well. So anyways, history doesn't repeat itself. It does rhyme. So where are we at? So in regards to margin of safety, we are primarily value investors, meaning we evaluate the intrinsic value of a cash flow stream of some asset, and we have to give it a price, right? And what we're seeing in the marketplace right now is people are overpaying for that income stream. And it's specifically this. We own a lot of Class C multifamily properties. Well, I've been watching Class B and Class C continue to compress in the cap rates next to each other. So you have to ask yourself as an investor, yes, you might be able to add value to that property, make a 3 cap, a 6 cap. Yeah, you probably can do that if a lot of things stay the same. But if you're thinking about risk-adjusted returns, just look at my last 2 acquisitions, 2014 and 1995 build. I'm trying to de-risk portfolio risk through getting into newer assets that may have a larger kind of pool of people out there to maybe rent from that can pay rental increases and to sell other, the assets to other folks because it's newer product. We have a lot of 60s, 70s, 80s product, man. It's 2022. That stuff's getting old, it really is. And so that's fine because you can't build, affordable or attainable housing unless you're utilizing some sort of tax credit program or abatement program. I understand that. But when you think about the risk of these investments, we just are not seeing the margin of safety that we need. For example, we own about 750 units in one submarket here in Kansas City. Basis is about $50,000 a door. Well, a lot of brokers are calling me saying, hey, Logan, we just traded a deal across the street from your other one at 115 a door. And so I know you're in this scenario as well, where it's like, well, that's going to bust through my year 7 projections. And it's year 2.5 right now. The marginal rate of return of actually holding on to this and the risk that goes into holding this asset is not large enough to not sell right now. Do you think about this calculation? You could go and sell these assets, pay your capital gains, and your IRR is still higher than what is in the pro forma. Are investors really going to be upset about that? That's a question that we're answering right now. So what does that have us doing? Cautiously optimistic about multifamily. We'll continue to self-source good margin of safety deals. It won't be as much as we have. I understand that. But then we're also looking at other markets, right? So Kansas City very hot market, not compared to Austin, Texas or something like that, but hot enough, right? That has created kind of a place for us that we have to look outside. So we're looking at secondary markets around the Midwest, whether that be Omaha, Lincoln, Des Moines, the Quad Cities, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Northwest Arkansas, things like that. And then different asset classes. Like you mentioned, we are not just a multifamily group. We are an alternative investment private equity company that has a lot of experience in assets outside of multifamily. Well, what are people not talking about right now? Triple net lease retail and potentially office opportunities. And so we're evaluating those close to home here that we know a lot about. We know the areas very well. The tenants are very strong. We have 2.5 years of data now to see how they performed during a global pandemic and shutdowns, that we can now make more, better, and more informed decisions going forward. And so I think that's kind of what our strategy is going to be. We'll sell some of our projects that have highly appreciated because in Kansas City, we don't get natural appreciation like some of these other markets. And if we can capitalize on that right now, that's a big win. And then looking at other asset classes that maybe are priced more competitively, there's less competition in those, and they're very strong and they cash flow very well. That's kind of where we're focused at right now, Chad.
Yeah. And so guys, there was a lot of gold in that. You have to really unpack this. And look, many people don't understand the concept of a central bank or Federal Reserve. If you stay tuned, the next couple of episodes, Amy Silvas and I are going to be doing kind of a deep dive walk on what is inflation, why does it matter, what causes it, what is the Fed, things of that sort. We're not trying to villainize it. I mean, that's for you to decide whether it's villainized or not. But, there's a book out there called The Creature of Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffith. I'm sure you've read it, Logan, with the way you're speaking so eloquently about this, that explains in excruciating detail, not only why this is important, but history of not, where it didn't quite repeat itself, but it rhymed, right?
Yes.
And it will happen again, mark my words. So the question is when. So you have the choice. You can sit on the sidelines, hide under a rock, play the ostrich mentality, and just say, I'm going to wait for it to happen. It may not happen in your lifetime, folks. It may not. It will happen. Everything is cyclical, but the question is when. So what Logan is saying here, and it's very similar to the strategy that Quattro Capital is looking at as well as an alternative investment firm, is, we need to de-risk the investments we're looking at. Sure, I can go show you a 30 or 40, IRR on a Class C building that I can buy and raise rents $500, whatever it is people are saying they can do nowadays, but there's a lot more risk in that resident population. There's a lot more risk in the macroeconomics that are behind that, in government policy that is changing right now. A lot of things up in the air. Whereas, and oh, by the way, to Logan's point, cap rates, which is the measure of the cash flow and what the market is willing to pay, they are on top of each other. So if you got to pay a 3 or 4 cap for something with value add, so you can decompress it to a 5 or a 6 over time, why don't you buy something that's not 100 years old or something like that, right? I mean, you're going to have better infrastructure. That's talking just about multifamily, and then what he's saying here is, look, hey, yes, we were buying apartment communities because it makes sense. The supply and demand story is still there, but he's also looking at alternative assets to that, maybe some things that have value, but are less sought after right now. So, wow, lots of stuff there. I recommend everyone hit rewind about, 10 minutes and go listen to that again, because he said a lot there. And there's a lot of good guidance we can take from FTW on this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chad. I appreciate that.
Awesome. All right. I'd love to talk to Logan all day, and I might invite him to come back if he'll do it.
Yeah,
I'll do it. Let's get into a couple of questions that we ask everyone on the show. You're not going to get away from that so easy. So what is your superpower, Logan, as it relates to this business?
Empathy and understanding individuals' kind of motives, goals, and what drives them. My top talent is individualization. And so utilizing that into a leadership capacity is my superpower.
Sounds like emotional intelligence right there.
That's exactly right. Daniel Goleman, Strength Finders, read them all, and highly recommend those books about that. Just because you're a man doesn't mean you can't be in tune with your emotions. You heard it here first.
Another quotable moment right there. Okay. Biggest failure. What did it teach you, Logan?
Man, I would say this. I mean, my biggest failure is thinking that I could do it all early on. Everything, it's kind of like the Midas touch, right? Everything I touched turned to gold previously. And when you get over your head over your skis a little bit, and this is when I'll talk about my first couple projects, is when I started to really have to really step back and say, hey, I'm the limiting factor. I'm the bottleneck here. And thankfully they were my own deals. And so I was able to go through that pain myself. without investors' capital. And that was my biggest failure, was just not heeding, I would say, other people's advice that I knew of, that you need to think about this as a business. I was like, yeah, but I can just go do it all. And then, one of the other aspects of your business takes off, and now you don't have time to do all of that. And I didn't have any resources behind me to make sure that those things were happening. So just trying to do it all myself was by far my biggest failure in the real estate space so far.
I hear you, man. I still struggle with that to this day. It's something that it's a process. It never ends, right?
Absolutely is.
It's a process. Okay, very good. You have a free gift, I think, a free action plan.
Yes.
What is that, and where can we find it?
Yeah, so you just head over to FTW Investments LLC.com and find the link to action plan. What I tried to do was kind of take Parker and Corey, who are my business partners' minds. Parker's got a master's in business and in real estate. Specifically, Corey ran a family office for 12 years. I said, hey guys, why don't we take all of our combined knowledge and figure out a way for new investors to try to think about where commercial real estate investing fits into their portfolio. So I put this action plan together that basically talks through all of the benefits, and then it has a scorecard. So you actually score your own portfolio of all of your investments and say, hey, where's my risk at right now? Where am I weak at right now? And how do I fix that? And so that's the action plan that we put together. It's a webinar with some printouts. I've had some really great feedback on that, spent a lot of money and a lot of time on that. And I think it's some of the best knowledge that we have collectively as a group to help new investors kind of along their paths.
That's fantastic, folks. And that link will be in the show notes. Just scroll right on down and you'll have exactly what you need there. Last question. 4 pillars of Quattro, the fourth one being philanthropy. We love to invite you to, promote whatever philanthropic venture it is you're supporting so that our listeners can support on your behalf. What would that be, Logan?
Well, I sit on the board of directors for a nonprofit here in Kansas City called Restart. Their mission is to help to end homelessness, but actually get ahead of homelessness. And so making sure that the social services piece is there. We have rapid rehousing. We work with landlords across the city to place our clients in those buildings. And then we work with them to get to a point where they can actually pay their own rent. But, we have a bunch of beds that we have and we house people on a regular basis. So that is Restart. And I think it's restart.org. But if you just search Restart Kansas City, you can find that nonprofit. And that's where my heart is. And that's where we focus a lot of our efforts in regards to driving education and awareness, but also actual services to help that population that might be close to being homeless or helping somebody get off the streets, man. Thank you for that.
I appreciate that, Logan, so much. And that's really a soft spot for a lot of us real estate investors, because a lot of us are really trying to fix the attainable. I won't say affordable, is that there's a whole program around that, but the attainable housing crisis, right? Can you find something that is quality and affordable that you can actually pay with a living wage and live, and part of that, exactly is helping getting people off the street. So that's such a novel thing. I'd love to, I think we're going to go check that out as well. So thank you for that,
Absolutely.
Logan, we could talk all day, but I've got to ask you now, how can we get in touch with you? How can the listeners find you, find FTW, and find your 1031 exchange brokerage should they need some support?
Excellent. Yeah. Highly active on LinkedIn. Search Logan Freeman, Mr. Kansas City, and my big head will pop up there. If you want to check out the website, it's FTW Investments LLC.com. Lots of great content, just like you guys have on your website.
Appreciate that. All right, folks, this has been another impactful episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. Until next time, over and out.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway podcast.